Back to one of our top stories. 2 people have been arrested for arson and rubber bullets were fired to disperse demonstrators in Germiston today, as police and Ekurhuleni Metro Police officers responded to a protest over evictions. Firefighters battled the fire at the Home Affairs building in the city centre, which has now been contained. Gauteng Deputy Police Commissioner Major General Fred Kekana was on the scene and confirmed the arrests. Ekurhuleni Housing Company officials were carrying out evictions at Faroe Park Residential Complex. Campaign head and Ndifuna Ukwazi, Buhle Booi, joins us now to talk about the country's eviction laws. A very good afternoon to you, Buhle. Thanks very much for your time. Just what you make of what we saw in Germiston today, from what we've heard from the municipality, the residents affected, as well as the police.
No, greetings, Buhle, and greetings to your viewers at home. The scenario that we saw today at Germiston was a sad one, indeed, seeing people being evicted. We maintain that there can be no just evictions in the middle of a housing crisis. In this country, we have a crisis of housing that sits at 3.7 million. We have a backlog of 3.7 million, and that number is growing at 178,000 annually. So we're in a crisis of housing, and it is sad to see people being evicted into homelessness, and seeing that also the police, together with municipal workers, being violent towards community members. It's a very sad scenery. But what we must condemn, Buhle, is the burning of public buildings that are of service to our communities. I think we must condemn that, in as much as it is difficult to condemn poor people who are subjected to violence by the state, and telling them how to be angry is a very difficult thing, but we must resist burning public buildings that are of service and of use to our communities. Yeah.
I mean, I was talking earlier to my colleague Ngobile, who is at the scene, and I had several questions just as I was listening to her speaking to some of the affected residents, who were, of course, speaking on the back of what the mayor had to say a little earlier, and so many gaps. I'm asking myself questions like, where was the councillor for the area? Were there any engagements with the residents prior to the evictions themselves? How is the understanding of the problems that some of which you have referred to, about the reality confronting people, a housing backlog, unemployment? We're talking today about an unemployment rate that has edged up to 33.2%. But as you say, we cannot condone lawlessness that comes with torching buildings and general defiance of laws. But where do people meet? Where does everyone meet to discuss these issues holistically?
I think that's the problem that we have, is that, again, there's a particular context that we find ourselves in the context of the housing crisis. And I've already spoken here to the 3.7 million backlog that we have as a country, and that is growing. And part of this context is that the housing delivery in this country has been on the decline. In 1998, the state used to provide about 33,000 households. And in the 2022-2023 financial year, they were only providing 33,000 from the 235, that they used to provide in the early 90s. So that's a crisis that speaks to the scale of the problem that we have. And part of what needs to happen in the context of an eviction process, the first step in any eviction process is meaningful engagement. So the tenants, together with the municipality, which is the owner of the building in Germiston, must engage in meaningful engagement to find each other. Because what the Constitution says in Section 26 of the Constitution, it says that no one may be evicted into homelessness. And their personal circumstances must be taken into account when a decision to evict them is taken. Now, you build an understanding of these personal circumstances through meaningful engagement, which is the first step of what the municipality must do before it evicts people, to see if these people that are evicting, will they have an alternative accommodation if they're evicted? What will happen to them if they're evicted? So that's the first conversation that must have. And unfortunately, in what we see here, it seems as if there wasn't that kind of a conversation, because the municipality must be cited in court papers to provide alternative accommodation. But what we see is people's stuff being thrown on the streets, people being rendered homeless in the middle of a housing crisis. So that's a crisis that we have, and this is in direct contravention of the PI Act, which insists that municipalities must provide alternative accommodation to evictees.
Are they, in your experience, our political leaders in particular, I'm talking about, councillors, members of provincial legislatures, members of the National Assembly and the National Council of Provinces, are they alive to this reality that millions of South Africans are confronted with the reality you've just so eloquently explained in all its contradictions as well?
I mean, the state is very well aware of this crisis that we have. In fact, some of these figures come from government documents where the state, particularly the Human Settlements Department, is acknowledging the housing crisis that it has, and that's why it has a white paper out for review in terms of trying to deal with these issues of the housing crisis that we're dealing with. And National Assembly is very well aware, and you know that even the issues around evictions are issues that were discussed at National Assembly, brought up by the Democratic Alliance, where they wanted to erode the protection of PI that tenants continue to enjoy, to say that PI Act must be scrapped. And what PI Act does is that it protects occupiers, it protects tenants from being rendered homeless, and puts emphasis on the fact that municipalities must provide alternative accommodation. So they are very well aware of this. And what is said is that, again, in 1994, we only had 300 informal settlements in this country. And today we have well over 4,000 informal settlements. And this is an indication that the state is failing to deliver housing. And that's why they are moving towards what they call sites and services, to say that they lack institutional capacity to deliver top structures at scale. Therefore, what they will do is to deliver land and services to communities so that people can build for themselves. But another concern there, in terms of the approach that is being taken by the municipality, or by the government rather, is that it doesn't take into account the socio-economic circumstances of the people. Because when people are given sites and services only without a subsidy to help them build, is that people will build to the standard of what they can afford, and what majority of our people can afford is a shack, and people will be rendered into, or rather pushed into, a life of indignity. And that's a crisis that we have, and the state is very well aware of. And I think very important maybe to try to speak as well to this issue of Germiston. We're told that there is a social housing scheme. And social housing, Buhle, is a housing that is meant to cater to low-income households. Now, so that people can have access to housing. And that housing currently in this country is being underfunded. Less than 2% of national budget goes to social housing. And currently we will not even be able to deliver more than 3,000 social housing units. And we have a dire need of social housing in the context of this 3.7 million backlog that we have. But the state is not giving enough money to social housing to build at scale. And we'll continue to have these problems until the state is able to fund housing like social housing at scale, so that more people can have access to low and affordable housing in this country.
don't know of what you saw is legislation that is supposed to deal comprehensively with these issues. If indeed your heart and minds are actually not in the spirit and letter of those very laws that you are crafting, supposedly to deal with these issues. But that's why we're going to leave it, Buhle. Thank you very much for your time. Campaign head at Ndifuna Ukwazi.